thank you for that very nice introduction. I wrote a real speech, but I don't think I'm going to use it because my colleagues from the Westchester Community College touched on what they here. So I would hate to be redundant, but I did want to just formally welcome everyone here, and I wanted to say that this is a huge honor for Libby to be hosting this year's conference, and we're very happy to be here. We have some big shoes to fill because our colleagues from the Westchester Community College certainly put on a good show last year, so we took great pains to make sure that we put together a program equally as engaging and enjoyable for you. So I hope you continue to enjoy yourself for the remainder of the time. I wanted to also thank Robert Danilo and the president of the Northeast Community Colleges, and Scott. Thank you for everything that you have done to make this possible, and for guiding us, and for all of your great ideas, and thank you for keeping us on track. It's actually, in a way, it wasn't so difficult, not to diminish what we did, but we were very lucky in many ways because the theme of the conference is so timely and so appropriate in the current economic climate, that it was almost, it begged to be discussed. So now, just personally, when I heard President Obama's speech back in February of 2009, he lauded what we do and said, "Oh, it's wonderful, post-secondary education is a priority for this country." It was great to hear that, and I said, "Well, wonderful. Somebody actually is recognizing publicly what it is that we do so well." But what followed was really something that most of us are now really struggling with. 2020 is coming very, very soon, and we have to educate 50% more Americans with some sort of a college credential. That's a very big responsibility to fall on a handful of two-year colleges. We're talking a lot about, we know we have to enroll and educate more Americans, but the goals get bigger and the pressure grows stronger as the federal government reminds us that it is serious about holding colleges and universities accountable for their performance. So we spend a lot of time, the pressure is mounting, we spend a lot of time about how will we measure the student learning outcomes. All our conversations revolve around outcomes. We discuss benchmarks, college readiness courses, remedial courses, faster pathways to degrees and credentials. I don't know about you, but we're having those discussions by our water cooler. It's really something that it's almost, you can't read the Chronicle of Education anymore without somebody crying about having to raise tuition, about having to cut jobs, and yet to rise to a higher standard. But this isn't anything new. For the past decade, 2 decades at least, we've had a lot of regulations come our way that have put our industry at crossroads, and we've had a lot of regulations that have changed what we do, and will continue to change what we do. Our next speaker, Dr. King, is going to discuss, should actually uniquely qualified to give us a historical context of the regulatory environment of higher education. Can you hear me, everyone? Sorry. Dr. King has recently retired from the New York State Department of Education, where she worked with post-secondary colleges across the public and the private sector, including our college. Dr. King also served as staff to the New York State Board of Regents, and Dr. King's education and academic credentials include a PhD in sociology from State University of New York at Albany, a Master of Science in Counselor Education from the State University of New York College, and an AD in sociology from Morgan State University. At this time, I would like to invite Dr. King to the podium. Please welcome Dr. King.
Thank you. I'm going to tell you from the beginning. I'm not going to really talk about what's in the book. As I started working on this paper, I'm an academic, although I was a bureaucrat. I still think of it as, an academic presentation. I had to go to the library, and it was kind of interesting because I haven't been in the library, in a research library, as a user in 12 years. I've been in libraries all the time because it was part of my job. But using the library, it was a unique experience for me. I was able to get a library card as an alumni from the university, and as a retired state employee, I also get a library card from the state library. Well, everybody has the same thing, but depending on what kind of library card you have, you get different kinds of access. So in order to look at the things I wanted to look at online, I had to do one set of looking at the university and another set of looking at the state library if I wanted to do it remotely. So it's been a very interesting experience. So anyway, as I started looking for information in terms of what I was going to talk about initially, and of course, again, I'll say as a sociologist, we always have to have a context. So that's what I said. I realized that what I was going to talk about was really not that interesting. So if I didn't find it interesting, I didn't think you would find it interesting. So I'll back up a little bit and say when Donna invited me, I said, me? What would I tell this audience about two-year colleges? Mainly because I did not work with community colleges in any of my jobs in higher education. And so it was like, okay, community colleges. Which is also kind of a problem because when anybody says two-year colleges, you almost immediately think of community colleges, which is the trap I fell into. But then I said to myself, you work with proprietary two-year colleges, you work with ag and technical colleges, and you work with independent junior colleges. So maybe you do know something about two-year colleges. So when Monica came back to me again, I said, okay, I can at least think about this as nothing more than an intellectual exercise. So, when I started doing my research, and it sounds like the things that you all have been talking about are the things that I began to find interesting, in that there seems to be a lot of issues that when I sat in the state education department, that as a member of the bureaucracy, as a policymaker, as a regulatory body, these were not issues that we really talked about, although they were there and kind of niggly. And I don't know if I put together a whole bunch of sort of, I'll call it miscellaneous information about two-year colleges. And some of it, I guess, maybe I'll continue to share with you, just to make sure that, in a sense, we're all using the same sort of basic information. Two-year colleges offer opportunities for further education, mainly academic programs, or training for immediate employment, job training, initial employment, retraining, including both baccalaureate retraining. Two-year colleges also provide remedial, developmental, and continuing education programs, and this is a particular hallmark of the community colleges. And one of the things that I read, which I thought was kind of interesting, was that one of the role that was being defined that two-year colleges provide is an opportunity for women to address their changed economic roles. And I guess I hadn't really thought of that in a formal sense, but when you think about who's being served by two-year colleges, a large number of them are women who are trying to try to figure out how they're going to handle their new economic roles. As I mentioned for myself, I've worked with the independent colleges, the ag-tech schools, and the proprietary. So you've got the public, the independent, and the proprietary. And of course, the public usually are referred to as community colleges and are supported by funds from the state and local municipalities, generally the localities where they're located. And some of you here represent, I think, institutions that serve more than one county. So, for example, Columbia Green. And you have some others where institutions will serve more than one county. The independents are your private, not-for-profit colleges supported by private money and privately governed by independent board members. The proprietary or private institutions operated as profit-making enterprises. One of the things that I think is kind of interesting in my experience in the education department is that a number of institutions do similar things, but because proprietaries do them, they're considered to be not so nice, but that community colleges, independent colleges can do them, and it's sort of okay. I won't go into any of the details of that. I would just say that one of my supervisors, their approach to looking at proprietary colleges, and some of it I would say is deserved, but I don't think we can take all proprietaries in this life, is that you're crook until proven otherwise, which is not very helpful. So clearly you can tell that's not my point of view. One of the things I think also, when you think about two-year colleges, encourages you to think about community colleges, is that almost all the literature is about community colleges. There's very little, almost none, on the independent two-year college, and there is growing body of literature on the proprietary. I think that probably one of the reasons why there isn't more literature on the proprietary is that they are profit-making, and a lot of them will hold on to their information because it is proprietary. They don't want to share their secrets, because if you know what they do, everybody will know what they do. So that's sometimes, I think, a problem. As you know, two-year colleges award the AA, the AAF, and then AAF. In New York State, and I don't know how widespread this is, there is the Associate in Occupational Studies, which actually grew out of the move of non-degree granting proprietary institutions that offered career education, vocational education, moving into degree granting and wanting to have some kind of degree to offer, but because there were none or little liberal arts requirements for those degrees in those programs, they couldn't fit into the AAAF or AAF, which all, at least in New York State, have requirements for liberal arts requirements. And many of you may know that courses that are general education may be accessible other places as general education, cannot be substituted for liberal arts. New York State has a very strict definition of what's liberal arts. So that's an option that exists in New York State. Of course, colleges often make more than one credential choice for a specific educational program available. For example, offering a degree and a certificate program where the programs may serve the same may have the same first year, but diverge depending on the degree program, requiring more specialized courses or more liberal arts and general education courses. And I guess you all probably know about the growth in the two-year college section, and I guess I won't share those statistics with you, although maybe just to say one statistic I had was enrollment at community colleges grew 741% from 1963 to 2006. The Carnegie Foundation looked at associate degree institutions, and you're probably familiar that they look at those institutions that are associate dominant versus those that have this other category of granting associate degrees. And it's kind of interesting that the numbers change a little when you look at the associate dominant institutions, with the public actually being the smaller in terms of numbers of institutions. For example, 42 public, 44 not-for-profit, and 73 for-profit. And that's nationwide. Two-year colleges, and I would say this is probably more true at the community colleges than elsewhere, initially offered baccalaureate programs that they thought would be highly specialized and unique programs, not being offered by four-year colleges and universities, and that they would serve place-bound students that supported workforce development and unique local and regional higher education needs, which would then have rather limited demand for specialized degrees. One of the things that I've observed in my 10 years in the Office of College and University Evaluation is that there has been some more growth in that area, and that there are increasingly four-year institutions that will offer these specialized degrees. Mainly, we're talking about a Bachelor in Professional Studies, again, that does not have the same liberal arts requirements as a BA or a BS. Another program is the BBA. Again, it's another program that does not have the same kind of liberal arts requirements. But that really is more reflective, I think, of the job market in terms of people wanting more business background. When we think about the history of two-year institutions, they started out as junior colleges, coming out of high school, providing the first 2 years of a bachelor's degree. And then in the 70s and 80s, these two-year institutions began adding occupational and technical programs and became more comprehensive community colleges. And there's been considerable growth in terms of corporate training, welfare work, GED, remedial programs. And when there are workforce shortages, the two-year colleges have really jumped in to develop programs to serve those needs. In 2001, only 49% of the degrees awarded by community colleges were in the liberal arts, sciences, general studies, and the humanities, and 51% were vocationally oriented fields such as business management, administrative services, health professions, and related sciences. And I would say that probably has shifted somewhat. But one of the two things that I see as a problem, particularly with community colleges, is that they have been asked to serve everybody. The student who wants a 4-year degree, they're coming to transfer. The student who wants just a little training so they can get a job. Those who want more training because the kinds of jobs they want require a credential. The person who has a post-baccalaureate degree, who has a baccalaureate degree, who is not trained for the job now, but just needs, again, a little bit of training so they can get another job. Or if they do need a credential, they can come and get this credential, particularly at the community college. My sense is that with the independent two-year institutions and the proprietaries, because they serve generally very special niches. They're not under the same kind of pressure that community colleges are. But my sense is also that nobody, in a way, is doing a good job of selling themselves, which goes back to some of what Juan and Chet were talking about in terms of their experience of going to Title III, for example, of needing to have research. The catchphrase now, particularly in teacher education programs, is evidence-based. So when should evidence? And so that seems to me that that's one of the issues that all two-year colleges need to deal with is how do you sell yourself, and not just, the PR, the sign on the subway or the sign on the side of the road or your view books or whatever. But when I think about when I was in this department, everybody looked at graduation rates. Well, that doesn't tell the whole story. There was an institution I worked with briefly that classified itself as a four-year institution because that was a way of being able to get additional funding from their central administration. But hardly any of their students started as first-time, full-time students. And graduation rates are first-time, full-time students. So when you looked at their graduation rates, it suggested that nothing good was happening at that particular institution. So how do you go about deciding what it is that you're going to look at so that you can develop your outcomes and make those outcomes known to everyone? I've also worked with institutions that would say, often say to me, well, that's not, this doesn't really tell you anything. But they also didn't have a way of telling me what they really wanted to tell me. You've got to be able to tell a story that policymakers, bureaucrats, regulatory bodies can live with, can sell to the public. I think that one of the things that happens is the public has a very narrow view of what two-year colleges are, particularly community colleges. And that I think people still think that the main job of a two-year institution is to offer the first 2 years of a baccalaureate program. And that is an important thing to do, but it's, as I just said with the statistics, 51% of the students are not in liberal arts programs. They're not doing the first 2 years, at least not what we think of as a traditional 4-year program. They're not doing it, even though most of them will come in with the expectation that they will get a baccalaureate degree. So how do you manage that? One of the things I actually took out of my formal little presentation here, but I'll talk about a little bit in terms of students' expectations, is this concept of pooling out. And I don't know if many of you have seen this, but it's a charge, I guess you would say, that's levied at two-year institutions where students come in with the expectation that they will eventually get a baccalaureate degree. If they're coming in, they're going to get these 2 years, they're going to move on and get a baccalaureate degree. But in the process, students' expectations about continuing their education are modified. Now, whether we do it, and I'll say we, I didn't ever work in a two-year institution, but I know working with students on campus, they come in with these expectations, I'm going to be an MD. And they get in science and say, no, I don't think that's for you. So, that's a cooling out. When you lower your students' expectations, you're modifying them, and that some people in particular feel that two-year institutions are particular culprits in this, partly because so many of the students that are served by two-year institutions are disadvantaged. They don't have the resources, the network, whatever, so that this kind of modification that may occur doesn't happen. I would sort of say as an aside, I have a nephew, he's 20. He is finally graduating from high school this year. So whenever people would ask me, how's your nephew doing, I would say, he's still going to school. Okay? So you know, after that, it's getting me. So I was talking to my sister, and she said, his name is G. So we might be talking about it. But anyway, I said, well, what's happening with G? She said, well, he decided to go to Kingsborough Community College. And I said, I know some places he can go where he can get a 4-year degree off the bat. You think I could convince him to consider this? She said, no, all his buddies are going to Kingsborough. I said, okay. Well, you know, G comes from a family where education is valued. Everybody's got a baccalaureate degree at the minimum. So him going to Kingsborough makes me a little nervous. So she assured me that he and his buddies are definitely going to get their 4-year degrees. And I said, okay, well, I'm going to modify this cooling out effect because I will be on the case about what are the courses you need to take so you can go to a 4-year college. So, you know, that's you know, I guess in a sense I don't have any problem really with Kingsborough. One of the reasons my nephew is saying so long to finish is that he does not thrive in large environments. Well, we know Kingsborough is not small. So that's another thing that makes me nervous. So, you know, he's got an advantage in that he's got his arm. But for all those people who don't have that advantage, who are holding out, what are the things you need to be aware of as you're negotiating this system, because it really is a system, how well the institution supports students in negotiating the system. One of the things that I found rather interesting was this notion about the writer talked about it as a charter, but I'm going to talk about it as sort of how you establish legitimacy. And one of the ways that as institutions, particularly 2-year institutions, you establish legitimacy is how well is your degree accepted. 4-year colleges generally, even the ones that aren't the greatest, get a certain amount of legitimacy just because they're 4-year colleges. When somebody graduated from that institution, there are all kinds of assumptions that are made about what a student can do. But there aren't assumptions about what a student can do when they completed a 2-year college and have an associate's degree. So ways in which legitimacy is established is how many of the students are able to transfer to 4-year institutions? How many students are able to get jobs? One of the articles I read suggested that community colleges in particular put a lot of attention into accreditation, faculty, those more formal things that are very similar to the kinds of things that 4-year institutions do. Where proprietaries in particular, and again, I said there's almost no literature on the independent colleges, so I won't talk about that. But the proprietaries, their legitimacy is established by what jobs their students are able to get. So it's about building relationships on 2 different levels. One is about it's still about what happens to these students once they leave, but how is what you're providing viewed? How is it accepted? Is it accepted because students can go to another institution, almost any institution of their choice would be the gold standard, I'm assuming, or do they get jobs in the industries, in the businesses where you are doing your job training, your career development with those students? As I said before, there's the whole issue around emphasis on graduation. And I will say that my experience, the education department is also an institutional accreditor like Middle State. So that a lot of my experience with two-year institutions has been not only at the level of doing program review, but also doing institutional accreditation. And this has been largely with the proprietary institutions, because with the community colleges, you know, there's pretty much a understanding that you're going to go to Middle State. And again, regional accreditation. Again, because of the regional accreditation, there is again this sort of expectation, the standard is about do your students transfer to four-year colleges. I haven't done any business with Middle State to two-year institutions, so I can't say how they treat two-year institutions in terms of whether the expectation is that those students will go to four-year institutions, or whether Middle States are going to have Middle States at a proprietary institution, which more and more are doing, whether Middle States accepts however the institution is defining success. My sense of Middle States in particular is that how you define things, because they can be pretty loose, how you define things will be the standard upon which you are judged. So that my sense is that you have two-year institutions have the ability to be able to define, scope, have people think in the way that you want them to think, but you've got to have the evidence to move them in that direction. Let's see, anything else I want to say? I think that it's really, I guess I sort of can't overemphasize in my view. And, you know, I was in the heart of things. Granted, I didn't get the big bucks to, the bigger bucks. Some people would say I got big bucks. The bigger bucks to go statewide and say, this is what the regions, because technically the regions are the ones who are setting the standards in New York State. These are the things that the regions are looking at. These are the things that the regions want you to pay attention to. Because we are in this environment of accreditation and everybody seems to be fixated on graduation. How do we, say that in the broadest sense, get people unfixed on graduation rates? That there is more going on at these institutions, that students, the community are actually taking advantage of and are meeting their needs. It's not always about graduation. So I think I'll stop there.